Michael Jackson, one of the highest stars ever. The rise to the top, and then the fall. Do you think he was guilty of child abuse, child molestation, or do you not? Let's look at the facts and discuss this together. He is the most awarded recording artist in the history of popular music and is recognized as the most successful entertainer of all time by Guinness World Records, selling an estimated 1 billion records around the world. He has the record for the most Grammy Awards won in a year, with 8 of them. Michael Jackson, 1984. Jackson sold more than 750 million records worldwide. He notched 8 platinum or multi-platinum albums and 13 #1 singles, and had 47 tracks crack the Billboard Hot 100. And then, November 20th, 2003, he's booked on child molestation charges at the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. What a fall. Or maybe not. June 13, 2005, Jackson is acquitted of all criminal charges. After a trial that had a circus-like atmosphere and whose proceedings seemed to be sometimes upstaged by Jackson's antics, including showing up late in pajamas on one occasion, the singer is acquitted of all charges. At least some of the jurors seemed to place the onus on the alleged victim's mother, Janet Arvizo, according to NPR. Allowing a child to sleep with any non-family member, one of the female jurors asks, according to NPR, what mother in her right mind would allow that to happen? Within months, prosecutors charged Janet Arvizo with fraud and perjury related to statements made at the Jackson trial. She accepts a plea agreement the following year. Now, Janet Arvizo is the mother of one of the alleged victims. So that is definitely an interesting situation there. Joe Jackson was Michael Jackson's father. He was an American talent manager and patriarch of the Jackson family of entertainers. He was inducted to Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame in 2014. And then he has passed away. Strippers, hookers, and sex clubs. How did Michael Jackson's seedy childhood affect him? Michael Jackson's abuse from father caused horrifying physical reaction. Michael Jackson spoke openly about the abuse he received from his father, Joseph Jackson, while he was growing up in the Jackson 5. He was intimidated and beaten when he got dance steps wrong. The star even revealed he had a painful physical reaction to his father out of pure fear. Now, these are statements that have been made by several people, including some of the family members over the years, that Michael Jackson was beaten with a switch and with belts. In fact, his father admits that he hit him, but says they weren't beatings, they were just discipline. Now that's got to be pretty scary for a young child to be beaten or hit with a switch or a belt because you didn't do something exactly right. Very traumatizing indeed. He was introduced to the topic of sex, this is Michael Jackson, at a very early age while touring as a member of the Jackson 5. He and his brothers would perform at strip clubs, sharing the bill with strippers and drag queens, and the sexual adventures of his brothers with groupies. Wow. From a young age, Jackson was exposed to sex. He received mixed messages on the subject from his parents. His mother, Catherine, was a devout Jehovah's Witness and conveyed her thoughts clearly. Lust in thought or deed was sinful outside of marriage. Physical intimacy should be saved for marriage. In contrast to his wife, Jackson's father, Joseph, a steel mill worker, shunned the religion and would have the Jackson 5 perform in strip clubs and seedy bars in the earliest days of their career. He allowed 9-year-old Michael to watch from the wings of the stage as male audience members whistled at women who stripped until they were nude. And while playing at Chicago's Peppermint Lounge, the brothers made use of a peephole in their dressing room through which they had a clear view of the women's bathroom. They would take turns watching and, as Marlon recalled, learned everything there was to know about the ladies. Now, these kids are very young, so let's look at maybe the impact that had on Michael. During other residencies, the siblings would perform the Joe Tex song Skinny Legs and All. Joseph, the father, would instruct the young Michael to make his way into the audience, crawl under tables, lift up ladies' skirts, and peek at their undergarments as part of the performance. Though embarrassed, Jackson gave in as he knew the audience loved the routine. Following such performances, the Jackson brothers would then be tucked up in bed by their oblivious mother and reminded of the virtues of being a good Jehovah's Witness. Catherine remained unaware of her son's strip club activities for many years. So you see what's happening here. You have a child who's under tremendous pressure to perform. He is beaten if he doesn't perform right. He is being robbed of his childhood, and he's being exposed to a lot of sex at a very young age. That's pretty dangerous. Alright, so what we have here is quite the psychological recipe, which can indicate that Michael may have become a child molester, a child abuser, if you will. So let me explain this really quick. So what happens is, if you have a traumatic childhood, say a childhood that's filled with fear and trauma, say with violent beatings or extreme pressure, and you combine that with robbing a child of their childhood, which happened with Michael and the brothers, okay, and at the same time you experience high levels of sexual content, which Michael did, which can provide some kind of an escape, a relief. Not that this is good, but this is kind of how the mind works. So you introduce, it's like putting a child on drugs. You know, the drug makes the child feel good, even though it's destroying them, right? And it's harming them. So you take a child who's young and impressionable, and you put them around naked women. You give them access to looking at naked women. You put them in strip clubs. You let groupies hang all over them. You basically make this child have an escape from all of their pressure and their stress, and you show them that that escape is sex. And that can cause quite an addiction at a very young age. That's kind of how the psychological thing works. It's the same thing if you have a drug addict or an alcoholic and you go to a rehab. What they want to do is find out, when did you start? What was going on in your life when you first got high, when you first decided to start drinking, right? They want to know exactly what was happening at the time, because chances are it was that you were trying to escape from. And once you get to the root, you chop that root, then you can get to the core of the addiction. If you keep treating the symptoms, you're not going to get nowhere. You got to get to the root of it. So in the same way, a young child that's exposed to pornography or sex at a very young age can become very addicted to it, and it becomes a part of that child's psyche. It permanently messes them up. It really does. And some profiles of predators have revealed this in conversations that they have had with investigators and detectives, okay? Where their childhood was traumatic, sex was the way that they escaped. That's how they kind of dealt with things. And then as they got older, they needed to learn to grapple with the trauma of their past. And they don't do it. So what happens is they end up trying to control their past. So that brings them back to a time where they felt like they had control, where they felt like things were better. And if that happened when they were young, then often they will seek out young people, and the sex becomes part of it because that's how they lived growing up. Now, this isn't an excuse, but it's an explanation of how some predators are formed. So let's look at Michael. He gets older, and he's older, and he's older. He's the most famous pop artist out there. He's got all this money, unlimited resources. He can have any child he wants at any time, right? Now, he wants to relive his childhood, right? I guess we can kind of get that. He didn't have a childhood. He never got to play with friends. He never got to really go to zoos and amusement parks and all those cool bike rides and things that kids like to do. He never got to do that because he was always on stage, always training, always rehearsing at the strong, heavy hand of his father. You are going to get out there and do it right. You're going to keep going. You're going to keep going. You're going to keep going. The pressure on a child has got to be immense. And Michael was in interviews saying how there were times where he'd see kids playing at the park across from the rehearsal studio, and all he wanted to do was go play. Just he wants to go play and be a normal kid, but he couldn't. So he gets older and he recreates this childhood, you know, with all the rides, amusements, and all this stuff, Neverland Ranch, right? Now he's inviting kids there. His reasoning is he invites the kids there so that he can show them the fun times that he was never able to have. A lot of times they're underprivileged kids, kids that were sick. Make-A-Wish Foundation kids would come there. So he's trying to give them a chance to have what he didn't. Okay? Now, he could be doing that to try to soothe himself from his past. Okay? And that in itself is not a bad thing. If you want to spend the time and the money to grant Make-A-Wish, wishes and help kids out, that's a great thing. Right? But we have to look at the fact that Michael was traumatized as a kid. He had a whole lot of sexual input put into his life as a young kid. There were stories out there that we don't know if they're absolutely true, but when they first started out, they were living in a single family home in Gary, Indiana, and all the brothers would sleep in the same bed together. And there were reportedly times where his father, Joe, would bring prostitutes home, bring people home, and then have sex with them in front of the boys. Now, that's traumatizing in itself, but it can also have that feeding addiction part to it, right? That element to it. Now, what happened in that bed with his brothers, if anything? We don't know. What was the response of the brothers when they saw this? We don't know. But certainly, Michael trying to recreate a childhood that's not painful is what we've seen him doing. Okay? So he has the kids there. There's reports that they were sharing a bed with him in his bed. Michael Jackson has clarified that and said, no, they weren't actually in my bed. When I say share the bed, I mean they got to sleep on the bed and I slept on the couch or on the floor. We don't know. But what we do know is absolutely, if you're an adult and you're not a family member, and even if you're a family member, when you get to a certain age as a child, you don't need to be sleeping in the bed with an adult. It's not healthy and it's not right. And if you're not a family member, then that's just even more scary, right? So if they were in his bed, that's some concern. That's a really big concern right there. Now, if a stepfather or a stepmother lays in bed watching a movie with their stepdaughter or stepson, is that wrong in itself? Sure. No, it's probably not. Could it be? Yes. So do we know if the kids were in his bed? No. Do we know if he did anything to those kids? No. What we do know is the first alleged victim, the 13-year-old cancer patient, came out years later and said, I lied. My mom made me lie. Michael never touched me, right? There were a couple other kids. Macaulay Culkin, for example, said, I stayed over there tons of times. He never did anything to me. So we have kids saying that, no, he's never done anything like that. He's just a big kid, right? Then we have a couple of other people that came out just a few years back, 5, 6, 7 years back actually, who initially said he didn't do anything, and now they come out and said that he did. And they're looking for lawsuits. Now, do the lawsuits mean no, he didn't do anything? No, it doesn't mean that. So we just don't know. What we want to present to you is that there is a recipe here that could have created a child predator, a child abuser, a child molester in Michael Jackson. There's a very good possibility of that. Is it 100% sure? No. Does any time an adult spends time with your kid to go places and hang out and do things, does that mean they're wanting to abuse your child? No. Right? There's tons of great people out there. There's, different pastors and youth ministers and mentors and teachers even. Gotta be careful with the teachers. I know. 229 already this year have been arrested. Yet you have to keep your eyes open for the warning signs. You have to watch the warning signs. You know, if somebody's spending time with a child and it's your approval parent, and you know the person, and you know they're spending time with the child, and you're communicating with that child, and there's no red flags, there's no warning signs, there's no sexual talk, there's no sexual touching, none of that. That can be a very positive thing, especially for a child who doesn't have a father or a mother in their life, right? That could be very, very healing for a child to have that person they can go to. But you always have to keep your eyes open and look for the warning signs. With Michael, that was hard to do. There are reports that he had cameras outside his room and that he had a way to have the door locked if somebody was coming. You know, there was a house cleaner that reportedly said she saw some strange stuff. So we just don't know. You know, we're going to sit there and we're going to take a balanced approach on it and say, we don't know 100%. What do you think? Do you think that he was abusing kids? Now you might say, what does it matter? He's passed on. Time has gone by. But it's important. We want to do this video because it's a teaching lesson, right? You want to know the profile of a predator. This will help you to identify somebody who could be a potential predator. Do you know an adult, an older teenager or a 20-something, or an adult who's had a traumatic childhood where sex was very prevalent in their life, prevalent in the home, right? That could be an indication that they may have an issue, right? These are the things you have to look for. It's not necessarily 100%, but it's stuff to look for. The point of this video is, we don't know if Michael was abusing these kids. We don't know if he was just trying to give them a happy childhood like he didn't have, right? But you always have to be aware. Always look for the warning signs. Always look for the behavior changes. Always watch the person that's spending time with the child. Always keep your eyes open and look carefully and keep an eye. You can't trust blindly, but at the same time, you can't mark everybody guilty who wants to help a child, because there are great people out there who do, right? So that's our summary of the whole thing. Let us know what you think below. Do you think Michael hurt these children, or do you think he didn't? Let us know below. Like, subscribe to this channel, share the post on Facebook. Let's get this out there. We can engage a conversation around this that can help more kids be protected. Check out our website, protectyourchildren.org. Protectyourchildren.org is right there, protectyourchildren.org. And just thank you for taking the time to watch this. Again, check out our website, protectyourchildren.org, and see the ways that you can help us protect kids all around the globe from predators online and in the community. So thanks for listening. Let us know what you think below. Take care.